Okay, so let's cultivate our motivation. Again, feeling very joyful at our opportunity to be able to hear the teachings, because it's quite rare to have this opportunity. There could be so many interferences, but right now we have this chance, and so we're incredibly fortunate, and it's important to feel happy about that. And then to make a determination to really use our life wisely, particularly by practicing the thought training teachings, because they'll show us how to transform any situation we encounter into the path to enlightenment. And especially to do that by practicing bodhicitta, the loving, compassionate aspiration for full enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, and doing everything with that kind of motivation. So let's cultivate that motivation now. A very happy mind. There are a few questions from last week before we go on to this week. So somebody is asking, because there was one of the instructions to handle whatever affliction is strongest. So the question is, how do you determine what the biggest problem is and the things that cause the most suffering? Well, you just look. Yeah, as we begin to meditate, we'll see things coming up in our mind, different thought patterns, and we can see which kind of thought pattern, disturbs our mind very strongly and takes us away from the Dharma and makes us distracted or makes us miserable and makes us do or think things that we would rather not. And so we just look at what's going on and see what it is and then work on that, okay? Don't worry too much about getting it wrong, because then your worry about getting it wrong is a form of doubt that's going to keep you from doing anything, and maybe that's your biggest one. But, in other words, don't in these things, don't get really contorted and into a tight way of thinking. Okay. Okay. Then there was something about last week we were talking about the verse from the 37 practices of bodhisattvas. When my mothers are suffering, what use is my own suffering? What use is my own happiness? And to remember that line is said to apply in a specific situation. Okay? The situation is when we're acting with self-indulgence. Okay? When our mind is just completely spinning around ourselves, then the way to pull ourselves out of it is to open the mind and see the big picture of what all sentient beings experience is. And when we see that, then our own little happiness just automatically seems insignificant when we stop spinning and being obsessed about it. Okay? So that's the context in which that verse is said. You'll notice that the verse did not say, because sentient beings are suffering, I have no right to be happy. Okay, it didn't say that, did it? It doesn't say, because sentient beings are suffering, I should feel guilty about being happy. It didn't say that either, did it? Okay, because feeling happy is what all sentient beings want. And that's why we're practicing the path. Okay, so happiness is not bad. Yeah, what the verse is referring to is when we are being very self-indulgent, and myopic, and just caring about ourselves at the expense of others. Okay? So it's very important, in all these different teachings to really understand them properly. Otherwise, we generate all sorts of wrong conceptions and start to dislike the Dharma. But actually, we're not disliking the Dharma, we're disliking what we think is the Dharma because we haven't understood it properly. Okay? So this is quite important. Yeah? So the whole idea is that, when we're very much spinning around ourselves, then to have a big picture and think of the situation of all sentient beings. And so one of the retreatants from afar wrote in and just was, he had talked with me about this at a retreat, but this is how he's doing it, expanding beyond his own little borders, okay? So he said, perhaps you recall when I attended the 7-day retreat last fall. At that time I discussed buying and giving reusable grocery bags to the next person in line. Okay, I thought I'd to share my progress to date. Okay, because I told him, yeah, that's a great idea, go for it. So he said, immediately after coming home, the first time I went shopping, I bought and gave away a bag. The recipient was very thankful, and I was pleased. After reflecting on the giving, I knew I felt some pride in the act, and I have worked to purify this affliction. Okay, now I can't somehow imagine somebody in the checkout counter, giving somebody a bag and then going, I am so wonderful, in the middle of the grocery store. But anyway, maybe he felt that way. But when we do something good, we should feel happy about it. Not pride in a negative sense, but pride in a virtuous sense of, oh, I did something really good, that's wonderful. I mean, we're supposed to rejoice in our own and others' virtues, so we should feel happiness. We shouldn't feel like, oh, I did something virtuous. Again, I should feel awful, because only when I feel awful is it going to be virtuous. Give me a break. Okay. Since then, I've given away grocery bags 2 or 3 times a week. I guess he goes shopping a lot. I bet he'd save a lot of gas money if he only went shopping once a week. Usually to a grateful person. Now I find I actually get embarrassed by praise and try to get away from the result of the act. Just, when you do something and somebody says thank you, say you're welcome and feel happy about it, and that's it. We don't need to make a big deal about it. Okay? Somebody's grateful and we say thank you. We're happy, they're happy, everybody wins. Okay? I know what I'm doing is better for the environment than doing nothing. However, at this point, I think it's time I attempt something more challenging. You can attempt something more challenging, but keep giving away the grocery bags. Because there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah? I mean, like I said, if somebody's standing there in the middle of that grocery store, kind of banging their own chest saying, I'm so wonderful, then okay, But I don't think that's what's happening. We're so funny, aren't we? Yeah? We're funny. When you give something free to a stranger, you can get both positive and negative responses. I think most people are interesting in some way, even those who seem to be otherwise. Okay? So I think that's quite nice to do that thing. I saw a bumper sticker, commit random acts of kindness. I think that's quite nice, and to do that in the environment, it just creates a very good feeling, and makes people happy, and hopefully is good for the environment. He actually wanted us, I think it was him, maybe somebody else, to make grocery bags that said Sravasti Abbey with our logo on them. But I said we're sticking with the hats for right now. Although we could branch out into the bags, if people would use them. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to our text here. Okay, so the next one that we're doing says, practice that which is more effective. Okay? In general, generosity is worthwhile, but observance of pure ethical conduct is more powerful. Similarly, it is most important to lay the potential for the awakening mind and not to be separated from it under any circumstances. Okay? So when it says practice what is more effective, it's saying generosity is good, ethical conduct is good, bodhicitta is kind of the best thing. But the thing is that if you practice bodhicitta, that doesn't mean you stop the generosity and ethical conduct. Okay? That if you practice bodhicitta, then, your wish to be generous increases, and of course your wish to keep good ethical conduct will also increase. Okay? Then the next one says, don't let three factors weaken. Okay, so this is referring to, one, faith in and respect for your spiritual masters. Don't let that diminish. Okay. Two, not letting your attention to ethical training waver. And three, not letting your joy in mind training lessen. Okay. So if you do not believe in or respect your master, there is no way for you to develop knowledge. And if your concern for ethical training decreases, there is no chance for your ethics to be pure, for all downfalls and misdeeds come about through recklessness. If your interest in mind training declines, you will lack the faith that would enable you to appreciate the qualities of the awakening mind and the aspiration and so forth that are its results. The drawback of this is that lacking a heartfelt interest in the doctrine, you will pay it only lip service. Okay, so the first one is to not let decline your faith in and respect for your spiritual master, okay, because if that happens, there's no way for you to develop knowledge, okay? So, why this is important is because we learn from our teachers. If we don't have respect for our teachers, then we think, what they say is like, meh. And so then even, they're reading to us the sutras that the Buddha spoke, we won't listen because we don't have respect. So it's something that harms our own mind. Yeah. So when we're talking about respecting for our teacher, it doesn't mean that you get into some kind of groupie mentality of, oh, my teacher is so wonderful, this kind of stuff. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you, some people confuse respect and fear, because, I respect them so much, so that means I'm afraid of them. No, I don't think. If we really respect somebody, we shouldn't be afraid of them. We should be considerate of them if we respect them, but not afraid. Okay. You see the difference here? Because I think sometimes people get it confused. I know in prison situations, a lot of the guys say, oh, people don't respect me. In a way, they get respected by intimidating somebody else. okay? And then somebody else, out of fear, treats them well. But that's not my definition of respect. You know? I mean, to me, if you really respect somebody, there's a feeling of closeness and appreciation. So that's what we want to respect. Because when we have that, then we really listen to the teachings and we listen to the instructions and we take them to heart. Okay, then the second thing not to let decline is not letting our attention to ethical training waver, because if it does, then there's no chance for our ethics to be pure, for all the downfalls and misdeeds come about through recklessness. Okay? So if we let our attention and appreciation for ethical conduct decrease, okay, then we're losing our conscientiousness, okay? And so we stop considering ethical behavior to be something good, and so then we just stop doing it. And that, again, works against us, because when we stop doing ethical behavior, we're just creating so many more obstacles in our own mind, okay? Some people feel like to act ethically, they have to sacrifice so much. Yeah. Like, boy, you know, if I lied, I could really get a lot of money, but I have to sacrifice that and get less money by not lying, you know. But if you see that, you know, I mean, okay, you're losing the money, but then you can go to bed and be peaceful in your own heart. Yeah, and you're not worried about somebody else finding you out about your lying. And when you die, you have this whole richness of ethical conduct to take with you. And so you feel quite good about how you've lived your life. Okay? So I think, you know, we shouldn't feel that keeping ethical conduct is, you know, this great loss of the happiness of this life. Because actually, if we don't keep good ethical conduct, we'll get in a lot of trouble, won't we? Even this lifetime. I mean, future lifetimes will have a lot of problems. But this lifetime, when we don't have good ethical conduct, then we have a lot of relationship problems with people, you know. We're not acting properly, we're not speaking properly. We get problems with the police. We get all sorts of problems, yeah. So it really pays off to keep very good ethical conduct. Yeah? And I think this is, you know, we all feel like, oh, I do pretty good ethical conduct. But we should look, you know, except for this and this and this and this, you know. Or maybe ours are kind of white-collar no-nos. Yeah, but they still, you wind up in a white-collar prison, don't you? But all the collars are the same color in your prison. I'm reading a book about juvenile crime right now, so I'm thinking a lot about this, yeah. And especially when you're young. I mean, remember when you're young, it's like, you know, ethical conduct, that's for old fogies. Yeah. So. Okay, then the third thing to not let lessen is letting our joy in mind training lessen. Okay, because if our interest in mind training declines, you will lack the faith that will enable you to appreciate the qualities of the bodhicitta and the aspiration and so forth that are its results. And then the drawback is that you have no interest in it. Okay? So if we let our interest and especially our joy in mind training decline, it's interesting here. If you let your joy in mind training decline, then you'll have no interest in it. Okay? So what that's telling us is that we should joyfully practice mind training. Okay? Our practice of mind training shouldn't be like, you know, schlepping a ton of bricks or something. It should, you know, oh, yo, heave, ho. Not like that. Do you remember that song from grade school? Yeah, something about the Erie Canal. And anyway, you know, little spice for your next meditation session. Okay. But when you remember that thing, that's not what my practice of thought training should be like. You know, it shouldn't be this, you know, like laborious thing that we're doing. But it's something we should take joy in, okay? So, because if we take joy in it, then it's fun to do, then we're interested in it, then, you know, we learn more about it, and it kind of builds on itself, okay? Okay, so when it says the thought training practice, not letting our interest in that decline, what are we not letting our interest decline in? What's this thought training practice? Okay, so transforming problems so we can practice bodhicitta. What else? Yeah, okay, so cultivating a courageous mind. And what's the heart of the thought training practice? Bodhicitta. Okay. Yeah. So the two bodhicittas actually, conventional bodhicitta and then ultimate bodhicitta, which is the wisdom realizing emptiness, which we're coming to. Okay. So when it's saying not to lose our interest in it, you know, this is what we're referring to here. Okay. Then the next one says, never be parted from the three possessions. Okay. You should not cease to perform virtuous physical actions, such as acts of service towards your spiritual masters and the three jewels, prostrations and circumambulation. You should not cease to recite the refuge formula or recitations pertaining to meditational deities with your speech. And in your mind, you should nurture and never be parted from the awakening mind and its associated practices. Okay? So, never be parted from the three possessions means never be parted from the virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind. Okay? And so, the idea is that don't leave our body, speech, and mind idle. Yeah? Because sometimes, wasn't there some kind of old thing like idle hands get into trouble? What? The idle hands are the devil's workshop. Okay. Yeah? We learned all sorts of interesting things as kids, isn't it? Well, if the devil is the self-centered thought, okay, and idle hands is, you know, losing our mindfulness and losing our introspective alertness, okay, then when, you know, we lose our mindfulness and introspective alertness regarding our body, speech, and mind, then the self-centered thought takes over and runs the show, doesn't it? Yeah? And so that's why it's so important to continuously bring our mind back to something that's useful and worthwhile, and not let our mind stay in some kind of very negative funk. Yeah? Because that's not helpful to us at all, to let the mind stay there. Yeah? So when our mind gets into that kind of thing, we have to know to ask for help. Yeah? And then to also try and help ourselves by pulling our mind towards, you know, a virtuous mental state and a happy mental state. Okay? And so to make that as part of our practice. So here it's saying, you know, something to do with our body, you know, like when you have nothing to do, you know, and there's no dishes and woods and, you know, and all these kinds of things, computer stuff. Then circumambulations, prostrations, Okay, offering, what else did it say? Offering service to your spiritual masters and to the three jewels. So to keep ourselves physically busy, instead of just kind of crashing out like, to do something physically that is of service to others. Okay, this doesn't mean wear ourselves out and not rest. It means, instead of being lax, try and transform our body into doing something virtuous, or doing circumambulations, or prayer wheels, or, helping somebody, something like that. Then also verbally, speaking kind words to others, or, reciting mantras, reciting different, recitations or things like that. Okay, it doesn't mean you always have to be walking around the house saying something. Okay. People after a while go, hey, be quiet. But if your mind is starting to or if your speech is starting to go in a weird direction, or your mind's starting to go in a weird direction, saying mantra is very, very good. It brings you, it anchors you back to something. Yeah, and helps you do that. Yeah? And especially people who have a lot of time, if you're driving to work, or if you're sitting somewhere with, nothing to do, then, mentally doing, reciting mantra, or memorizing some of the different short, texts that we have. Yeah, trying to memorize these things. So using your time in that way is very, very helpful. Okay? And then mentally, instead of just letting our mind, kind of surf the universe, going here, there, and everywhere, is try and anchor our mind to virtuous thoughts. Here he was saying to never let it be parted from bodhicitta and its associated practices like generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, and so forth. Okay? So instead of letting our mind sit and swirl, and, nobody likes me, and everything I do is wrong, and my life's a catastrophe, and no wonder nobody loves me, and I'm so worried about the future, and it's so insecure, and what's going to happen to me, and what's going to happen to the people I love, and I don't like this, you don't know? Oh, you know? How the mind just can, spin out in its fear and anxiety and worry and just depressed thoughts, and discouraged thoughts and all that kind of thing. So instead of letting the mind just go on like that, stop it and redirect it and try and think about something that makes the mind happy. Like read the Shanti Deva prayer, the dedication prayer, the one that we do to Star Spangled Banner. We probably all have it memorized now, because when you do it with a melody you learn and you remember it. But you even think about those thoughts, and then your mind is happy, isn't it? When you think about kind thoughts, and you think about, extending ourselves to others with kindness, but we think about others' kindness to us. When we direct our mind to those kind of topics, then our mind feels relaxed and it feels quite happy. Yeah? So to, deliberately direct our mind in that kind of way. Yeah? Because the whole thing is about where the mind is, isn't it? Yeah, what we do with our mind and how we think. Yeah? And so instead of believing everything we think, when we know we're thinking something that's really not making much sense and not very beneficial, shift the way we're thinking. Okay? Look at the situation differently. Because that's the solution. Yeah? What else are we going to do? Complain that everybody else should change? We've been doing that for a long time. Have they changed? Okay. So better to change our mind. Then, if you relapse, meditate on it as the antidote. Okay? So it says, for some people, wrong meditation gives rise to such attitudes as, and here we're going to get the kind of distorted way of thinking that if we meditate on the thought training practice incorrectly can arise in our mind. Okay? Thoughts like, having meditated on thought training, slanderous attacks have increased. In other words, I've been trying so hard to be nice to people and they just are so rotten to me. Or I've been doing the taking and giving meditation for them and now they just speak so cruelly about me. I've been taking on their suffering and it's really working because now, they treat me awfully. Yeah? And we can think that and get ourselves good and wound up, can't we? Yeah? Okay. Another kind of... that's what you were doing last week? Okay. Then another kind of wrong thought. The misconception of self and others... the misconception of self and other disturbing emotions have increased. I've been taking on all the afflictions of other sentient beings. I've been taking on their depression, and now I'm so depressed. I've been taking on their anger, and now I'm so angry. I've been taking on their attachment, and now I'm just like spinning with attachment. Yeah? Okay? Then another kind of thought. These more distorted thoughts. My resources, such as food and clothing, have declined, and I'm troubled by an increase in sickness and the interference of evil spirits. I've been practicing giving and taking meditation, so I've been giving my body and possessions and virtue, and now I don't have any food, and I don't have any clothes, and I don't have any shelter, because I've been doing this meditation, imagining giving these things all away, and so now I don't have it. Woe is me. And then I've been doing thought training practice, taking and giving, taking on others' sickness, taking upon myself all their interferences. And now I have all their interferences and all their sicknesses plus my own. And, this practice is driving me crazy. Okay. So our author says, if you feel like this, you will lose interest in mind training. Okay. You will lose interest in mind training, and there is a risk of your giving up the practice. Yeah? And it's true, isn't it? We can get ourselves into all sorts of weird things, and then it's just like, oh, this thought training practice and taking and giving, it's just, it works. It's like, get me out of here. Something like that. In such circumstances, you should think, this practice will never deceive me. It is the influence of demons, in other words, the self-centered thought. Okay, so it's the influence of the self-centered thought which is causing me to relapse from the practice of meditation. Okay, so instead of doubting the practice and saying, oh, the thought training practice is just, it's harming me, not helping me, to realize that this practice won't deceive us, but we're doing something wrong in the way we're thinking about the practice. Okay? So this is very important, in our practice, because lots of times we can hear different teachings, and I know I've done this myself, and meditate on them in a way that I think I'm following the outline. And then I come up with a conclusion which just is like, makes me miserable and makes me confused. And then I think, oh, gee, Mini, why am I practicing this if I become like that? Okay? Like you meditate on the disadvantages of selfishness and you conclude that, oh, I'm so selfish that, I'm worthless. Yeah? And, I'm so bad because I'm selfish. This is a very easy thing to conclude if you meditate incorrectly. Okay? Yeah? Or there's all sorts of things, that we can meditate on incorrectly and come up with the wrong conclusion that actually acts as an impediment for our practice. So we have to be very, very careful about this. So if our mind is becoming more unhappy, if we're becoming angrier and more confused, then somehow we haven't understood the teaching correctly and we're not doing the meditation properly. Okay? So we need to stop and we need to go and ask a Dharma friend or ask our teacher and tell them, what we're doing and how we're ending up at the end of the meditation, and say, what am I doing wrong? Okay? Because the Buddha Dharma is not for the purpose of making us feel bad about ourselves and guilty and worthless and all that kind of stuff. We can do that plenty well without the Buddha, teaching us. So if we're getting into some kind of troubled mental state, we need to go ask for help. Yeah. There's also the chance that we have lung. Lung is this imbalance of the internal energies of the wind. Then you need to take lung medicine or you need to take a break. If your mind's, really getting funny, then you need to do some physical labor. Yeah, I think physical labor is very good for us because it grounds us in our body. We need to do some yoga or Tai Chi and, dig a ditch, come to the Abbey. We have plenty, chop down some trees, carry some wood. Maybe that's why there's the Zen saying, what is it? Carry water, chop wood, because doing physical things helps you keep yourself very grounded. Yeah? Okay? So, I think this practice will never deceive me, but somehow I haven't misunderstood things, and then go and ask for help, and then do the things you need to do to take care of yourself and keep yourself healthy. Okay? And wish from the depth of your heart that for the many people in the world whose minds are turned away from the Dharma, this may serve as a cause for them to integrate their minds with the teachings of the great vehicle. Okay? So if your mind is, thinking these kind of thoughts like what's going on here, that could endanger your whole Dharma practice, because you might just throw away the thought training, say, look, it's, I'm having all these problems afterwards. My wealth is decreased and I'm sick and blah, blah, blah. So forget it. So instead of thinking like that, think of the many people on the planet who don't have contact with the Dharma and who don't have access to these teachings. And think, by my experiencing this, may this serve as a cause for them to integrate their minds with the teachings of the great vehicle, with the Mahayana teachings. Okay? And so you really, aspire so that others can meet these very precious teachings and practice them and actualize them in a correct way. Okay? Okay, and the next one. Engage in the principal practices right now. So it says, we have been deprived of freedom in inferior rebirths, because of being born in inferior rebirths, over beginningless time. But now, due to certain inner and outer conditions, we have found this life in a free and fortunate human being, as a free and fortunate human being. At such a time, it is more important to work to actualize the purpose of future lives than those of this life. Since practice is more important than study, I urge you to unify the focus of your meditation on the awakening mind and its associated precepts. Okay, so we have to understand. This is something we have to understand properly, okay? So we've been deprived of freedom, in that we have taken many inferior rebirths since beginningless time in the hell realms, the hungry ghost realms, the animal realms. Okay? But now, due to certain inner and outer conditions, we have found this life as a free and fortunate human being. So in the meditation on the precious human life, there's certain conditions that are inner ones, in other words, that have to do with how you are, and certain ones that are outer ones that have to do with the environment you're born into. So inner ones would be like having a healthy body and mind, having interest in the Dharma, things like this, having being born in a human form. External ones would be like having being born in a time and a place where the Buddha has appeared, has given the teachings, where there's still the Sangha, so that you have access to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha and the teachings and everything like that. So those are external things. So now we have this whole collection of both internal and external, good factors that enable us to practice. And so feel happy about it. Yeah? Really feel happy about it, because, it's a hard thing to come by. There's so many different things that need to fall in place to have this opportunity, and so feel happy for it. Yeah, it's like Khenzo Rinpoche. Do you remember when he went to Airway Heights Correctional Center? And some of you were with, and he sat there and for about a half an hour was telling the guys what a great situation they have for meditation, And he's gone on and on about, I come in here and it's clean and it's warm, because he was here in December. It was really cold. It's warm inside. You have a bed to sleep in. You have 3 meals a day. You don't have a whole lot of work to do. You guys have such good, opportunity to practice. And then he was telling them about, the prisons in Tibet after the Chinese communist occupation, and how, people would get arrested and they couldn't even say their mantra, and they were being beaten and tortured and, sent to hard labor. And he was saying, you guys don't have any of this. Yeah? And he was going on and on and on about it. And I'm sitting there thinking, boy, I bet you the guys didn't expect to hear this. Because usually what you do in prison is moan about how unfair and unjust it is and how miserable you are. And Rinpoche was saying, hey, you guys have this great situation. Yeah? So the idea is, look at your situation and all the good qualities you have going for you, rejoice about them and use them. Yeah? So instead of looking at 1 or 2 things that might not be the way you want it to be, look at what you do have and feel happy and make use of it. Yeah? And that's really important. So I know at the beginning of my practice I used to, because I didn't meet the Dharma until I was 24, and so and then I was in Kopan with all the little monks, these little kids, and they're memorizing all the scriptures and learning all the prayers and growing up in the Dharma. You grow up as a monastic since you're a little kid, and I'm going, I have such a horrible life because I wasn't born like this to be able to, practice the Dharma since I was a kid. I went to American elementary school with all the junk we learned, and, didn't meet the Dharma until I was 24 and wasted all that time and have all that negative karma and those bad habits, and these kids are so fortunate. And kind of, when you want to feel sorry for yourself, you can find anything to feel sorry for yourself about. Worldly things, Dharma things. You can sit there and complain. Okay? So I used to feel, kind of jealous of them. And then, 15, 20 years went by, and as, they hit like teenage years, young adult years, and it's like, whoop, there they go. Yeah, and then I realized, oh, wow, actually, maybe it was very fortunate that I was born in the States, because when I renounced, I knew what I was giving up, whereas they didn't have that. And so when they got old enough to look at material things and, the pleasures that society had to offer, the mind is like, I want that. Yeah? So then I started thinking, oh, maybe my rebirth wasn't so bad after all. Maybe I actually, had a good opportunity. Okay, I didn't meet the Dharma until I was 24, but, at least when I renounced, I knew what I was giving up. And, I don't want to go back to that. That's yuck. How can they possibly be interested in doing that? I don't understand how somebody can give up being a monastic to go wash dishes in New York, which is what many of them do. It's like, no. So anyway, my point is here, okay, that whatever qualities we have going, good situation we have going for ourselves, use that to the fullest extent, instead of looking at a few things you think you're lacking and moaning about that. Okay? So don't be like me and sit and moan about, oh, I should have met the Dharma when I was young. It's like, oh, you have this opportunity. Let's practice right now. And then I'm sure that, there's other people who come here and say, I didn't meet the Dharma until I was 60. And I go, great, you met the Dharma, practice, that's fantastic. Okay, so, this is the whole idea to really, put our efforts in a good way and make use of our opportunities. Okay? At such a time, it is more important to work to actualize the purpose of future lives than those of this life. Okay? So when we look at the long-term prospect, it's more important to keep good ethical conduct so that we have a good rebirth in the future than to abandon our ethical conduct and just try and get the happiness of this life. Good food, good social life, good sex life, good this, good that, nice, comfortable, blah, blah. Manjushri wants some cat food, looking for your cat food, excuse me, your steak and your chips and fries, your tofu, your chocolate chip cookies, instead of the mind getting all involved in that kind of thing, think about future lives. And the reason future lives are more important than the happiness of this life is because the happiness of this life, we don't know how long this life is going to last. So we could be working very, very hard to get things for later on in this life, and we don't live that long to get it, okay? So rather than lying and cheating on our taxes and things like that to get things, acting unethically to get things for this life, better to act ethically and have a good life in the future, okay? Also because although having a good life in the future is still something limited in the Dharma sense, it's not our final goal, but it is something that we need in order to keep practicing the Dharma. So even if our final goal is liberation and enlightenment, we still need a good rebirth next time so that we can continue to practice the Dharma. Okay, we're not just praying, can I be born the Queen of Sheba and, have sense of pleasure deluxe and all this kind of stuff. May I be born? Who would you want to be reborn as? You want to be reborn as some sports hero or movie star? They have so much suffering. Okay? So anyway, the idea is to really think about what's important in life and not relinquish the Dharma for the happiness of this life, but hold the Dharma as something that is most precious to us, our ethical conduct, our cultivation of bodhicitta, and so on, so that we can continue to practice in future lives. Okay? And so to make wise decisions based on that. Because, we only have this precious human life right now. Yeah? And when it ends, we only take with the good karma that we've created. Yeah, so if we've given up the Dharma in order to do some kind of worldly pursuit, then we're harming ourselves in the sense that at the time of death, what are we going to take with us to the future life? How will we be able to continue practicing? Okay? So it's kind of like, if you're a kid in Toys R Us and you have 1 hour to collect everything you want, okay, you're going to be busy, aren't you? Yeah. You're not going to sit there and go, no, I want to eat a peanut butter cup first before I get all my toys. Or, you're going to just collect all your toys and be out of there because you have 1 hour to do it. So the same way, we have a precious human life and it doesn't last forever. So to really use it as much as we can, to create as much virtue as we can, And then at the time of death, we have a lot to take with us. And then actually every day when we go to sleep at night, we feel good. We feel like, wow, I did something worthwhile today. I transformed my mind. I was of benefit to others. This is good. And there's a real feeling of satisfaction in your own heart. Okay? Okay. Since practice is more important than study, I urge you to unify the focus of your meditation on the bodhicitta and its associated precepts. Now, he says, since practice is more important than study, okay, this we have to understand in the proper context, okay? If all somebody is doing is studying and learning a lot of intellectual material, but they're never trying to put it into practice and change their mind, that's the person this advice is directed towards when you say practice is more important than study. Somebody who's done a lot of study but is neglecting to integrate it in their lives. That's who this is directed towards. It's not directed towards somebody who hasn't studied very much. Okay? Why? Because unless you've studied and you know how to meditate, even if you sit down to meditate or to practice, you're not going to know what to do, and you're going to get all tied up in knots. Okay? So that's why our teachers really recommend that we study the Dharma so that when we meditate, we'll know how to do it. Okay? Because otherwise, we just kind of come along and go, well, meditation, yeah, you just sit there and breathe. Okay? And I think, oh wow, this is nice meditation. Yeah, so you have to know, well, what does meditating on the breath mean? What does it actually mean to do that? What's the purpose of the meditation? How are you trying to watch the breath? What are you trying to get to? Yeah. What are hindrances to that meditation? So that even if every once in a while, how can you really learn to meditate properly? So this is why we have to study and learn. Otherwise, we can sit down with great intentions, but we really don't know what we're doing. And so we're going to waste a lot of time. Or worse yet, our mind will just spin with a lot of rubbish and we won't have the tools to be able to anchor our mind to a correct way of thinking. Okay? So that's why study is quite important. So you have to know who that's directed towards. Yeah. But if you only study and you don't practice, that's also a fault, because that's like, you have all your duckies, but you don't go in the bathtub to line them all up in the water. Okay? Or you have all your, your fudge, but you don't put any of it in your mouth taste it. Okay? Don't worry, I don't think of these examples ahead of time. They're just spontaneous. Okay. So, we want to unify the focus of our practice on the bodhicitta. Okay? Yeah. And so when we really understand bodhicitta, even though bodhicitta is the practice for the person of advanced capacity, we see that to be able to do that practice, we have to do the practice of the person of initial capacity and the person of medium capacity too. Okay? So it doesn't mean that you just do the bodhicitta meditations on love and compassion, equanimity, and so forth, because to really do those properly and in depth, if we have a good understanding and some experience in, precious human life, 8 worldly concerns and their disadvantage, death and impermanence, refuge, karma, 4 noble truths, the importance of the 3 higher trainings, things like this, then, that will really enhance our bodhicitta practice. Okay, time for a few questions. Yes.
I'm not sure that this question is completely clear.
Okay.
But it is something that it came up again as you're talking about us turning the mind.
Mm-hmm.
This trying to study the mind and really looking at what conception is.
Mm-hmm.
And how much we just make up out of habit. And so, on the one hand, it makes me question, because even our positive conceptions, it's like a question of how you really trust what's happening in your own mind. See, the more I see how much I make up,
Uh-huh.
And kind of spin out those kinds of conceptions,
Mm-hmm.
even if I'm trying to direct it more positively,
Mm-hmm.
how can I really trust that?
Like what?
Well, even I'm trying to look at the image of Tara. It's like, well, okay. I mean, this makes my mind happy, and yes, it's coming on a description of the Buddha, but this is still a concept, right?
Yes. Okay. So maybe your thing you're studying a little bit about mind and mental factors and the difference between a direct perception and a conceptual consciousness. When we have a conceptual consciousness, we're perceiving things by means of a meaning generality. We're not knowing the actual object. Now, does that mean that all conception is bad?
No.
No. It doesn't mean all conception is bad.
But I guess it's a question of trusting.
Okay.
Trusting one's own motivation, trusting one's own perception of the situation.
Okay, so you gave the example of, you're meditating on Tara, and it's, you're following the directions in the sadhana of how to do the meditation, and, visualizing her and developing some concentration and doing that the best you can. What's to doubt about that? Yeah? I mean, if you know what to do and you're trying to do it as best as you can, then you don't need to doubt yourself. You know that you're doing it the best you can. You know it's not perfect, but you also know it's the best you can, and so you trust it's the best you can, and you know that as you do it better, that then you'll be able to refine it more and more and more.
So the question is not so much about Tara, but then when to catch my own mind spinning out in concepts that are making me feel terrible,
Mm-hmm.
to just intentionally change that in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I'm following the direction, and that is correct.
Right.
In a way, it's exactly the same concept.
Okay, so you're talking about your mind spinning out on some kind of negative thought. Okay, and so you catch that, and then you take it and you direct your mind towards another kind of thought. Aren't you just thinking? Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with that?
Okay.
Yeah. If you know, okay, we want to get to the direct perception of emptiness. We're not there yet. Yeah. So what do you want to have? A blank mind with no thought? You want to be like a cow? You know, vanish all thoughts from my mind. Yeah, that's not the purpose of the practice, is to do blank-minded meditation and concentrate on nothingness. You know, the idea is when there's an affliction in our mind, we use any way we can to get our mind out of that affliction. Okay? So, you know, you're sitting there spinning out about, you know, oh, so-and-so didn't say good morning to me this morning, they're mad at me and they don't like me, and, you know, and I always feel uncomfortable around this person anyway, and, you know, why am I staying here? Because they're always around, never say good morning. Nobody else around here says good morning either, and it's like, I don't like to be here. I think I better go do something else. You know, so your mind's spinning out, right? Yeah. So, what do you need to do? You need to apply an antidote, right? Yeah. Do you have direct realization of emptiness? No. So you can't apply that antidote, can you? No. Okay? So, you need to apply an antidote that's going to work. Yeah. So you say something like, well, this is my mind spinning out about something. And you know, this is a habit, because I do this almost every morning. You know? Yeah, toast, coffee, and spinning out. So, you know, this is a habit in my mind. You know, where my mind just thinks all these totally nonsensical things. And you'll see, as you meditate, don't you find habits? Certain, you know, habitual ways of thinking where your mind always gets stuck. You know? And so we learn those mental habits. You know, at first, seeing them and recognizing them and deciding they're negative mental habits, that's a big thing. Because at the beginning, we don't even notice them. We go along with them. And then, even we notice them, we believe they're true. So we don't try and oppose them. You know, we think all those negative thoughts are true. So, yeah, why not think them? Yeah. So just getting ourselves to the point where we notice them and then we recognize that they're not realistic and they're not beneficial, that itself is a lot of progress. Okay. Then, okay, so I'm spinning out here. I got to do something else. Well, how can I change my mind? Yeah. Well, maybe there's many things, you know. First of all, I could tell myself I'm just making you know, one small, somebody doesn't say hello to me, and then I'm so wound up about this whole huge thing, you know. And here's the time when mother sentient beings are suffering, what use is my own happiness? Here's where it comes in. I'm spinning her out around this negative thought again and again and again. When sentient beings are suffering, what use is it to let my mind spin out about some ridiculous thought? It's of absolutely no use. No use to them, no use to me, no use to anybody, you know? So then you start reciting the four immeasurables. Yeah? And then you start anchoring your mind to the thoughts contained in the four immeasurables, and gradually your mind starts to shift. That is the meaning of practicing Dharma. Okay, practicing Dharma is not sitting there with your mala, and it's not sitting there like this. Practicing Dharma is confronting the afflictions and shifting the mind to a virtuous state. Yeah. So what more are you doubting?
No, that's helpful. I mean, I know that. I do that. But somehow it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you need somebody to tell you.
Yeah. Yep, I need somebody to tell me it's still okay.
It's okay. Yeah?
How over all these years since you met the dawned on you practice humility, how did you maintain that kind of strong sense of confidence or faith to continue?
Okay, so you're asking me how have I maintained a constant sense of faith to be able to continue with the practice? I mean, I've had ups and downs too, believe me. But I think the thing that really got me at the very, very beginning of my practice was when my teachers explained that ignorance, anger, attachment, and self-centeredness caused suffering. That when I looked at that, because this was a big thing in my first meditation course, and when I looked at my mind and I looked, and it's like, oh, he's right. Because I had always thought attachment was the cause of happiness, and it was like, And then anger, I always thought anger was something good, it protected me, and it was like when I really looked, it was like, boy, my anger's gotten me in a pile of messes, And self-centeredness, I always thought was my best friend. And again, when I looked, it was like, well, that's why I don't feel good about myself, because I'm acting with self-centeredness. And so I think it was just seeing that from my own experience in a way that it's like, it's true. It's true. So if that's true, then there's not a choice to make about whether you want to practice or not. Yeah, because we all want to be happy, don't we? We all want to be happy. So if attachment is making us miserable, we got to do something to get rid of it. And if anger is making us miserable, we got to do something to drop it. And if self-centeredness is making us miserable, we got to, generate bodhicitta in its place, It's like, this is a basic human instinct. We want to be well and happy, don't we? Yeah? So I think that whenever I would go through periods of doubts and, how do I know the Buddha exists, and how do I know this, and how do I know that, I would always come back to that, because that's something that, from my own experience, was so totally true. And so if you know that, then you don't have a choice, do you? Because you want to be happy. So then, you make mistakes, and your mind isn't always in a great state, and your practice gets sloppy, and, and you just pick yourself up and keep going. Yeah, it's not a big deal. I mean, it must be the way the Buddha did it, because the Buddha was once like us. Yeah, hanging out on the beach. Remember those waves? I'm a California girl. Remember those waves, Huntington Beach, crashing. Buddha was sitting there with me and Huntington, And he got enlightened, and I kept lying there on the beach. Okay. So we kind of, Buddha must have gone through the same thing. Yeah. And I just kept thinking getting a suntan was going to make me happy. Okay. Yeah, so. Yeah, I think Buddha must have had some ups and downs too, but he just kept going, so then we just do it too. And then also, I think something that I find so inspiring, I find the bodhicitta so inspiring, even though I don't have any bodhicitta, just the thought of bodhicitta I just find so inspiring. And it's like, wow, imagine being like that. Imagine having that kind of mind. That would be so far out, And so I just look at it. Yeah, I want to have that kind of mind. That would be really cool. So So then, you just kind of do what you can, one step after the next.